There. And I'm going to ask our panelists today to introduce themselves. So, Natalie, you are looking so adorable with your pink cheeks and your pink headband and your pink background. I love it all. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, I'm Nat Bullen. I've dropped my social links in the chat. If you want to be bored to tears, you can follow me on Instagram. If you want to laugh until your cheeks hurt, you can follow me on Facebook. I own Unapologetic Wealth. Unapologetic Wealth provides sales consulting and wealth coaching and general badassery to non-men. And it's pretty badass. I'm not gonna lie to you. We have a good time. I love preaching high ticket sales. I love talking about wealth and how we can put more of it in the hands of historically marginalized communities, which I think I get to be two of those, huh? And how we can build out more for ourselves and worry less about eating the rich. So I read the questions and thought this is going to be fun.
It should be interesting. And it's one of the reasons I was happy to have you here, because I think you're bringing a different perspective that Meg is going to bring. And we're not here to solve any problems today, but just to kind of ponder these questions together.
Great.
There aren't necessarily right and wrong answers. It's where are we at? And I want to just point out too that Natalie and Meg are the last two episodes of the podcast Feminist Founders that came out. And so this timing is really perfect because you can go and listen to their episodes if you like what they have to share.
And Meg was my first CPA in business.
What? I didn't even know you knew each other. So it's
Yeah.
a world. So funny. All right. Meg, tell everybody about you.
Well, hey everyone, Meg Wheeler. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am, as Natalie said, I'm a CPA, certified public accountant. I'm also a financial coach and educator, and I run the Equitable Money Project, which is all about making financial education more accessible to marginalized, primarily business owners, but really just everyone can benefit from the information that we have. We also have a done-for-you tax, bookkeeping, and CFO services portion of our business, but really our heart and our passion is about the financial education that so many of us do not receive growing up. And so I'm really excited to be here today. I'm regretting not having worn my Tax the Rich shirt. I don't know. I can't believe I missed that opportunity. Did not think about it. It's still a little cold here in Boston, so I'm in my sweater. But I'm really happy to be here, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Well, thank you. And Natalie pointed out your amazing artwork behind you. We are all looking at Shirley Chisholm, and it's wonderful. And Amelia Earhart, I believe.
That is my real office.
It's beautiful. I love it. Well, thank you both for being here. So again, this is informal and loose. We don't want to spend a ton of time either because we want to invite everyone into the conversation. But I want to kick it off by talking about wealth hoarding versus getting more wealth into the hands of folks like you said, Natalie, or members of historically marginalized communities, and kind of that balance and where you fall on that. And I think you're each maybe having a slightly different perspective on that question, because there is an argument to be made, like I said, for changing where wealth lies. And then also an argument to be made for, does that fundamentally change? Just changing the haves and have-nots, does that really change the deeper issues of systemic inequity? So I don't know who wants to broach this first, but Natalie, it sounded like you were ready, like kind of excited to talk about your perspective on this. So I'm going to start with you if you want.
I'm going to let Meg do it.
All right, let's let Meg go.
Oh no. Well, let me just start this off by saying and acknowledging the fact that I have incredible privilege, and I approach this from that perspective. But I am also, as Natalie said, you know, I think I'm two of the groups. I think I'm probably two of the marginalized groups as well. And so this is something I struggle with. You know, I have privilege in so many ways, and I'm constantly I'm feeling guilt, I'm feeling shame, I'm feeling concern over, am I hitting that right balance? And at the end of the day, there's not a right answer on this. But when I was thinking about the question earlier today, we have this sort of rule in our family, which is it's an okay thing if it makes you healthy, happy, or safe. It doesn't have to be all three, but at least one of the three. And for me, I think that's maybe a guideline to go along with is I want to get to a point, and I want all of us to be at a point where we have enough financial security that we can be healthy, happy, and safe. Not all the time. We're not going to be happy all the time. That's not what I'm saying. But that's where we're at. And then I think once you get beyond that, that's when I think we get into that. Do I really need more? And is more really giving me something that matters? And that's where when I look at billionaires, I feel such a level of discomfort. It's not because I'm afraid of wealth. It's not because I don't think that people shouldn't have money or shouldn't be wealthy, but it's because that's such an extreme that I feel as though it is not aligned with the values that I want us to have as a society. And so those are my initial thoughts, but I want to hear what Natalie has to say. I'm sure she's going to have a gold mine of thoughts.
Oh, like crap, that was over fast. Okay. Even though I am a Black woman, I do too have an amount of privilege. I have a college educated parent and had a college educated grandparent and a college educated great grandparent. So in Black years, that's really phenomenal. My grandfather was born in 1925. So like that wasn't normal. So I concede that. However, I want to have lots of money. And I've decided that 1,000,000 is 1,000 thousands and that 1,000,000,000 is 1,000 millions. I'm okay with being in possession of 1,000 millions. I right now, I also feel in this particular instance that because most of us are so far away from that reality that we really don't know how we would feel if we were closer to it. I spent most of my 20s not wanting to have kids. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, something in my brain decided that maybe I actually wanted a legacy that carried my genetic code. When I was 22, if you would have told me Natalie would have had 2 kids, which I still have 0, by the way, I would have told you were crazy because I was so far mentally from the idea of reproducing. I had done no research. I didn't know anything about birthing children. I didn't know anything about raising children. I didn't know anything about the costs. What I'm saying is that I was ignorant to what it even looked like to be a parent. And it's because my mindset was so far from it, it didn't start investigating. And so now that I've decided that I want to be really rich, I've started to investigate. Right? I've started to make friends with multimillionaires. I know somebody personally who is worth $100 million. He is the nicest guy. He does not have a toxic hoard of cash. He's not harming the poor personally. He made most of his money in the stock market, something that I believe in a lot. Is he a perfect person? No, he sins just like I do. And just like a lot of the people I know do. And so for me, I felt like I'm going to reserve my very close examination of how I would feel to be a billionaire or a person worth 100 million until I get close to it. Because right now I'm so far out of proximity, I cannot really assess and say how I would feel to have $100 million. Because 5 years ago, I would have told you that a person running a $500,000 business should be taxed 20 or 30%. But now that I'm a person running a $500,000 a year business, I can tell you I absolutely do not feel that way. I do not feel like the government deserves 150,000 of that 500K off the top. I do not, but I believed that just 5 years ago. Why? Because I had been convinced that rich people were doing harm. But I can tell you that my business is not harming anybody. I only charge high ticket to people who can pay it. We have accessible options. We have sliding scale and scholarships. I give free advice 5, 10, 15 times a day, every single day that God puts breath in my body. My Facebook page alone is a course. You can make 6 figures just following my free shit. So I have no guilt, shame, whatever. I'm doing the thing. And so I think we have a slippery slope to say that wealth magnifies this bad. I think people are inherently good or bad, and that money just magnifies what they already have. And if I know I'm a good person, an integral person, then having more money is only going to amplify the ways that I can showcase that I'm a good person, an integral person. And that is how you fight back against these evil people with money. They were evil before. They were evil before they got a small loan of $1 million from their father. They were evil before then.
Not to,
So
not to call any
that's not
particular
what
person out.
that's not what did it. That's not what did it. He was vile beforehand. We just know more about his vileness because he's famous and popular and rich. But the money is not what changed this person. I guarantee you, if someone handed you all a check for $1 million, it would not turn you into that. So I think we attack the money when it's the integrity and the character that we really need to call into question. And people of all socioeconomic classes can have poor character and poor ethics and poor morals. We just don't read about those people because they are not newsworthy. So I would rather get really, 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 really rich to be able to do some of the initiatives that I feel like are important to me to tip the scales. But as long as good people tell themselves that the money is what makes them bad, the bad people run amok and they get really rich waiting on us to deal with our moral battles about getting rich. And we can't battle rich people poor.
Yeah. And
well,
I think that,
can I just,
yeah,
I just have one thought on that. And I think that's such a critical point, and that I think Natalie and I will both agree on probably through all of this, is that money is just a tool. It's just a resource. Money is not anything other than that. We could trade rocks or Topo Chico bottles. It doesn't matter. There's no inherent value in money. It is just a tool, and you can be a billionaire that is causing incredible harm, as we've seen, and you can be a billionaire who's causing incredible positive impact in our society. It is just a tool to help us accomplish what we want. And I think that is such a critical thing to remember. And so I completely mirror that thought, that you absolutely should not ever feel shame or guilt for having the money. It's what you do with your life and what you do with your voice and what you do with the money that reflects on your character.
Yeah. And I would say the piece that I would add to that, because again, I don't believe that there is a right and a wrong approach here, and that anything is morally superior or not necessarily when we're talking about what anyone's sharing. The piece I would say is, because I am somebody who is pretty vocal about saying that I don't believe billionaires should exist. And again, this is just my personal belief system. And people will often ask me, then where's the cutoff, right? That's the question that, especially those people on social media who like to just fight with me about these things. Well, what is the number? Like, what is the maximum? And I say that number should go down to the point where every human on this planet at least has food, shelter, and health care. Once those basic human needs have been met, I'm not even including education in it, although I think that also should be there. But I just think at minimum, people need to be able to eat, to have a safe place to exist, even if that is a tiny home, but a place that they can be free from the elements and be safe, and be able to have their healthcare needs met so that they aren't dying on the street because they can't get a broken arm set, right, or something. Once those basic needs are able to be met for all humans on this planet, whatever that number is, I don't know that number. I don't know if anybody knows that number yet for sure. I know that it's not right now. The system we have right now isn't taking care of all humans on this planet. And I do think that that is the place where, until that is met, I think that we are at a place that is a crisis and not moral, because to me, it isn't moral until everyone has at least those minimum things met. That is not to say, though, that I in any way think that most especially people with marginalized identities, and the more marginalized identities, the more so, that they should not have wealth. In fact, I think that we do need, I sort of feel like the answer is a bit of scales need to tip the other way before they can come back into a place of more of a middle ground, right? So we've gone from this place where it's white men who've been hoarding all the wealth. I do think there is an argument to be made for maybe it is a bit of redistributing that wealth in a way that goes to people who have more of a matriarchal approach to the way they show up in the world. And then perhaps we can get back to more of middle ground where we say maybe no one needs to have that amount of wealth. And I think that the piece that's missing there then is government intervention, perhaps taxation, maybe not at 500,000, but over many billions. I don't think that billionaires should be paying a smaller percentage of taxes than the rest of us personally. Okay. That's the big question around big wealth, right? But I think the parts that are maybe more interesting for all of us who don't have, and probably, let's be honest, won't ever have $1 billion. So it's not really an issue we have to grapple with, but is around how capitalism teaches us to be on that cycle of more, 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 right? I mean, it's what it's about. It's like teaching us to be good consumers, because consumers buy, that help to continue to feed the wheel of, like, if you buy, then we have people who need to make, and then people get rich from you buying. So we learn to want more. And one of the things I like to do with my clients is talk about what's enough. That doesn't mean settling. I'm not saying like what's the bare minimum you have to get to scrape by, but most of us don't ever actually sit down to examine how much do I actually need to fund the dream I have. So like Natalie's dreams are very big, right? That's going to require more money, but what is actually enough to fund even that big giant dream? And for some people, their dreams aren't that big. What does it take to fund that? So I'm curious for each of you, like what work have you done around thinking about how much money you actually want and need?
Natalie, go for it if you want to take this one first.
Darn. Okay. I'm like, it's me. Probably around $50 million a year. That's the number that me and my FA came up with. Because there's lots of things that I want to do. I desire to have more money than I can save, spend, invest, or give away. So that's going to be a huge number. But just like some of the projects that are really important to me, like building 500 tiny homes, I actually had that priced out. I have a colleague who builds tiny homes in Atlanta. His name's Quentin. He's amazing. And talking to people who refurbish like school buses and what it would look like to actually have those be staffed, manned, and be something that can go around like homeless camps and actually give them a shower, do their laundry, give them a free haircut. I've looked at like what the annual cost would be to run just one bus and then staff that up to like 50. It's really expensive. Having a scholarship fund at my alma mater, Alabama A&M University, I actually came in on full scholarship. And so I want to have at least one full ride for Black students like myself from rural parts of Alabama that probably don't have a better option. This is like a big school to them, and let them come in for free. And unlike my scholarship that got snatched away when my GPA fell below a 3.7, if they can prove that they are working a job, I will allow their GPA to go as low as 2.5 and maintain their full ride. And because it's my scholarship, I can set whatever rules I want. The school cannot set the rules. And what's college going to be in 5 or 10 years, right? Like, what's it going to take to fund a 4-year full ride for even one student? So yeah, the things I want to do are going to be really expensive. I want a home here. I want a home somewhere in the south, southern region of the world, Panama, Honduras. My husband's Panamanian. I want a home in France. I've actually looked around at some options there. So the things that I want, ideally, it's going to cost a ton of money. Not to mention I have to earn enough to fight what's going to feel like, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50% in taxes. If I make 50 million a year, how much of that is the IRS going to feel entitled to? Because that's too much money, right? So like, I'm going to fight against that inflation, which is kind of rampant. The Fed's been fighting to get it down. They haven't done so as much. But I think even in the short term, even if you just want to spend 100,000 or 200,000 or 300,000 a year, I don't like the idea that we tell people what they should spend money on. Like, after you've gotten to a certain point, you're obligated to do X, Y, Z with money. Like right now, I'm below the point of wealth. People don't feel the need to tell me what to do with my money. But if I was a multimillionaire, people would get to decide. It's on you to eradicate homelessness. It's on you to feed the poor. It's on you to do these things. And it's like, well, is it really fair to dictate to somebody? Now, thankfully for y'all, I want to give away a lot of the money. That's part of why I want to have a lot of money, is because I know I'll do what I feel like is morally aligned with it. But I fear the enough conversation, because I feel like it pushes women to ask themselves, what is the smallest amount I can get by? It's kind of like being on a budget. It's very restrictive when we ask somebody what is enough. And all of us here who run a business have benefited from capitalism. I, for one, am glad we're not a socialist nation. I am glad we're not a communist nation. I'm not saying capitalism is perfect, but it has allowed a little Black girl from Mobile, Alabama with 6-figure student loan debt to start a business and pay herself a living wage for the first time in her life. So I cannot vilify that system that is the reason why I have a home that I am sitting in right now, or vilify a system that lets me charge $18,000 for private coaching. No job was ever going to do that for me. When I worked at the bank, we had free accounts, free brokerage, and we charge people $5.95 to execute a trade. Now it's free. There's no way I was ever going to generate that kind of wealth for myself in a system other than the capitalistic system we have now. So do I think it needs to improve? For sure. Do I think people are super materialistic? Hell yeah. But I know middle class people with 3, 4, 5 cars. My stepfather is a firefighter. He has 8 automobiles. I think excess comes in all shapes and forms. And I think a lot of us try to use money or materials or etc. to make up for the void that we feel we're missing something in our lives. And so I'm more interested in people's intent. What do they intend to do with the money? What do they intend to do to better society? And not just, is there a number? Because if we're just saying, okay, what's enough? Okay, well, I could live in this house and never pay off my debt, but get by for $5,000 a month. So I guess technically that's enough. But like, is that what God put me here to have? Just enough to pay my bills and cover the interest on my loans? And for me, I feel like that's a no.
Yeah. I want to, before I turn to Meg, I want to say a couple things. One, I am a socialist. I'm a democratic socialist, the way I show up in the world. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily right. It is how I show up, and what I believe. And the reason I really wanted to make sure you're in this space, Natalie, is because I think it's also really important for us to have differing viewpoints about money represented here. And most especially because what I'm excited about what you represent in this space is showing Black women, women of with other marginalized identities, that we need to dream bigger. Right? We are allowed to, we need to, we must dream bigger. And you represent that voice here of like, we need to be allowed to hold space to say, I want a lot. I want more. I'm allowed to have more. And I think that is so powerful and important for you to bring to the space. Whereas I, as somebody who has a more privileged identity, I think the nice balance of what you're bringing, and then also this idea of like, and it's also okay when you have more privilege to say, I'm allowed to say, I don't have to feel entitled to having everything, right? Because I think people with more privileged identities grow up with this experience of almost being told, like, you are supposed to have it all. And I think that my way of fighting back against these systems is to say, wait a minute, why? Just because of how I look, I'm like entitled to more. And I like that. I think your form of liberation is to say, hey, I've always been told I'm not allowed to have more. And F that, I think I should be able to. And I feel like both of these perspectives are a part of the liberation process in my mind. So, Meg.
Oof, that's those are two very tough acts to follow. I when I think about what's enough, the first thing that comes to mind is I don't ever want to feel helpless. If there's an issue I care about or something I want to do for my family or someone's sick or whatever it may be, I don't ever want to feel like I can't do something about it. And that might mean having a boatload of money to write a really big check, but it might also mean having enough money to be able to go take the time to work on that cause. I just met this morning, I'm a Democrat, shock. I just met this morning with my co-chair of my Democratic Town Committee, and we're talking about all these trips that we're planning this year to be able to go to Pennsylvania and Michigan and Florida and some of these states that, that where I hate to say where it really matters, because your vote should matter everywhere, but unfortunately our system's screwed up. So where it really matters, that's a privilege to be able to go to those places and take time off work and time away from my family and have someone to watch my child. And so I don't ever want to be in a position where I have to say I can't do that because I don't have enough money, enough time, enough resources. And so that to me, I think is what the enough feels like. It has actually nothing to do with the number. I have no idea what that number is, because I think the needs and the desires are always going to change. Right now I'm in a very simplified period of life. I want less. I've been decluttering my house. I've been getting rid of stuff. I'm overwhelmed by stuff. And so but travel is really important to me right now. Seeing the world, sharing that with my son, who is the best well-traveled 6-year-old I've ever met in my entire life. And I'm jealous of him because I didn't have that as a kid. So that's what my enough looks like in this season of my life. And that's probably going to change when he grows up and I don't have to watch him anymore and I actually have more time. And then it's going to be about wanting to make sure I can afford that time going to the causes that I care about.
Go ahead,
I want
Natalie.
to add something really quick. You brought up a story. It's actually in the community where Meg and I met. There was a young woman whose mother got diagnosed with a terminal cancer, bladder cancer, something. It was really bad. It was very sudden. It was stage 4. It was inoperable, incurable. Mother was going to pass. And she made a post in our community where there were 2,500 women. And there were lots of thoughts and prayers. Thoughts, prayers, thoughts, prayers, prayers, thoughts, beliefs, hugs, virtual energy, vibes. And I popped up and said, how much money do you need to fly to see your mom before she passes? You and the grandbabies, you and your kids, what does it cost? And she said, no, I didn't make this post about money. Your mother's going to pass. We don't have time for your pride. We got like a week. We got like a week and your mom's going to be in the ground. And I know that's horrible, but I want you to see your mom if there's any way possible. How much money do you need? She came up with some tickets and we raised up money, me and maybe 12 other people, and we got her and her 5 kids and her husband to see mom before mom passed. And I kicked it off with $1,000. I have never been able to give a stranger $1,000 and it not impact me at all. That's more than my mortgage. My mortgage is $905. I've never been in a financial position to where I could just, a stranger, I'm embarrassed to say I do not remember her name. But I was able to make an impact in that person's life. So if you have a friend right now who was in a domestic abuse situation, could you pay to get them in a new apartment and save their life? You know, it's like we don't think sometimes about the granular stuff, like the real life implication of having a surplus. We're thinking about the frivolous stuff, but you can do life changing stuff. And even though I don't remember her name, I bet you she remembers ours. I bet you she remembers the angels that made sure that she went to go see her mom. And so that's where I'm at in this season, is making sure I have enough for pertinent, relevant, urgent requests, even if it is somebody that I do not know personally, if it's going to change their life forever.
I love that. And both of you are making me think too of the other piece of this is, especially those of us who have, again, the more overlapping and intersecting marginalized identities you have, we live in a climate where it is a very real issue for many people to think about escape, to think about movement, to think about safety. And money is, in the world we live in, an important part of safety. And I think it's some of what you're both talking about is like, it's not necessarily about how do I have the most Louis Vuitton bags or whatever. Those things can be nice, also part of the happy thing maybe, but it is that safety piece of like some of having cash, having access to funds is, could I get my family to a place where we are safe if the laws in my state change suddenly to where my vote doesn't count, I can't get the access to the healthcare that I need to show up in the world the way I do, or if I have an unplanned pregnancy, whatever the things are. So I think that that's another really important piece to remember. I was going to talk about making money, but honestly, I feel like this is a good place to stop because we're at the halfway point and open up the discussion. So I'm going to stop recording.